Thank you. Our next item is issue 8, the new motor voter program. I think we're at a point in the agenda where we probably can move some of these forward relatively quickly.
This one's going to take a while.
This one will take a little bit. Okay.
Want to talk about it?
Who's going to kick this one off?
If I might, Mr. Chair.
Of course.
Thank you. Rhonda Pascal from the State Transportation Agency. I wanted to share with the committee that agency has been working very closely with DMV and the Secretary of State on the most recent improvements to the voter registration process at the department, and will continue to do so as we work to implement AB 1461. I want to take a moment to commend Director Shiamoto and her team at DMV, who with limited time and resources have implemented significant improvements to the voter registration process at DMV, and they were able to do so in time for this year's elections. Just a few short months ago, members, we were working with a completely manual, paper-based process, and now for certain driver's license and ID transactions, DMV is able to capture voter registration information and electronically send that information to the Secretary of State and county elections officials. The types of transactions and the number of transactions where this will occur will increase significantly under AB 1461, and we look forward to continue to work with the Department and the Secretary of State on the successful implementation of that legislation by next year. With that, I will turn it over to Director Shiamoto, but I'm happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chair, that you and the committee may have.
Thank you. Director.
Thank you. So this proposal is a new statute, BCP, to request one-time costs associated with implementing the new voter program established under AB 1461 that was signed by Governor Brown last year. This program changes the current DMV voter registration process from an opt-in, where customers choose to register to vote, to an opt-out process, where customers will be automatically registered to vote unless they state they do not want to be registered. The department is requesting $3.9 million in general fund dollars to cover the costs to implement the automatic voter registration process identified in AB 1461. The costs incurred by DMV for this implementation are related to the re-engineering of the current processes, new hardware, software, and equipment, as well as system programming. From our conversations with the Secretary of State, our understanding is that they plan to certify VoteCal in July 2016, and our understanding is that they will have everything in place by July 1, 2017. So DMV is moving forward to meet a go-live date of July 1st, 2017 for AB 1461. So next I'm going to provide you an update on the May revised monies we received last year. So last year we received a budget augmentation for a technical upgrade to the voter registration process. These improvements allow the department to collect voter registration information for certain driver's license and ID card transactions and electronically send that information to the Secretary of State and election officials. DMV had initially contemplated using an already scheduled replacement of our signature pads in our field offices as an opportunity to work with the vendor to do the programming necessary to pose voter registration questions such as your party affiliation, language preference, and subject to our DLI decal applicants. However, after the budget was enacted, the legislature passed and the governor signed AB 1461, which vastly expanded both the types of transactions as well as the number of transactions where DMV will be required to collect voter registration information. So DMV, as Rhonda Pascal said, we were nimble and responsive and able to identify a solution to provide for a seamless and successful strategy to implement AB 1461 without negatively impacting our DMV customers and operations. For field office visits, DMV is directing our driver's license ID customers to touchscreen terminals to collect the voter registration information, such as party affiliation, vote by mail, and language preferences. So we used a phased rollout strategy for the implementation of the touchscreen terminal process. So we began this implementation on April 1st and rolled this out to one office, the Sacramento Broadway office, to ensure the technical upgrade for the voter process was working as intended. So next we added 4 additional offices. They went live on April 6th, and those offices were in Santa Clara, San Francisco, Pasadena, and Hollywood Cole. Then 8 additional offices went live on April 13th, and another 8 offices on April 14th. Then the following week, we went live with 60 more offices on April 18th, and the remaining 93 offices went live just last week on Monday, April 25th. So as of today, it's been exactly 30 days that the touchscreen terminal process has been in place. So DMV, we have and we continue to monitor the touchscreen process, and we make adjustments. And we already have made one adjustment so far. So as of last Monday, April 25th, we have placed employee ambassadors in the touchscreen terminal areas to ensure that customers are directed to the touchscreen terminals to provide the voter registration information. In addition, customers choosing to register to vote at the DMV, they're getting a voter registration receipt and a voter registration process checklist that is pink in color that enables DMV employees to easily detect and track these customers for voter registration and guide them to the touchscreen terminal to complete the voter registration process. In addition, we have 83 message boards in our offices, and we're working to put voter information, the process on our touchscreen, on our message boards, so that our customers, while they're waiting to see a technician, learn what to expect for the voter registration process. So the touchscreen terminal voter registration is available in 10 languages at our touchscreen terminals. That's English, Spanish, Chinese, Korean, Japanese, Hindi, Thai, Vietnamese, Tagalog, and Khmer. So the customers are done with the voter registration process at the touchscreen terminals in about five minutes. And initial feedback from our customers and employees that the process continues to be positive. We get positive feedback. So as of last week, we've seen approximately 14,151 customers have registered to vote at a field office. And we estimate, based on these initial numbers, that about 250,000 customers would register to vote at a field office. And we do approximately see about 1.4 to 1.7 million original driver's license ID card applicants in an office in a year. And we see approximately 25 million customers in a year in all our field offices. So we also modified our online driver's license ID card renewal system. Renewal applicants are asked if they want to register to vote and then are redirected to the Secretary of State website. This was put into production on March 30th, 2016, and over 17,000 customers have opted to register to vote. So DMV, we are committed to the voter registration process, and we're working diligently with the Secretary of State on the May revised process and the implementation of AB 1461. So as the Director of the Department of Motor Vehicles, I am extending an invitation to any legislator or your staff to come and visit a field office to see the actual voter registration process in person. We can make arrangements for any time, any day, and any location, and we can arrange for multiple visits to see the process. And so these arrangements for these visits can be made through our DMV Acting Legislative Director, Patrick Barrett, who you can contact. So we've worked very hard in a very short amount of time to implement an electronic voter registration process. And so we completely rolled out this process April 25th, and we are confident that this process can and will be successful. We are only prompting customers who are eligible and want to register to vote to respond to the voter registration questions. As I mentioned before, we are closely monitoring this process, and we will continue to make procedural adjustments as needed as they come to our attention. So our core mission is to license drivers and to register vehicles, but we are committed to having an electronic voter registration process integrated into our daily operations. So the funds currently being requested for the 2017 years are primarily for the complete re-engineering of the renewal by mail process required by AB 1461 and the change of address process. Both of these processes now must include all voter registration questions on the renewal form and the change of address form that we provide to the customers in the mail. This requires us to purchase new remittance equipment to process the new forms that we now full letter size instead of the tear-off stub that we currently get in the mail. So as I've said before, this technical upgrade has been implemented statewide as of last Monday and is in production for 30 days. And so as a rollout with any new system, adjustments are made to continue to refine the process. We are committed to this process and making voter registration. This is our top project for the department. And we have pushed out 2 other projects to implement this May revised solution and the electronic voter registration process. So we have also modified the DLI ID card online renewal process to interface with the Secretary of State online voter registration application. And now customers renewing online are asked if they want to register to vote, and they are redirected to the Secretary of State website. And the customer's personal information is also electronically sent to the Secretary of State. So the May revised request was to create an electronic voter registration process and to capture the voter information electronically that previously was captured on a paper registration form. So DMV currently right now, we only have 1 to 2 signature pads in each office, and we were mindful not to have customers wait in long lines to use a signature pad for the voter registration process. We have over 2,200 touchscreen terminals in all of our field offices, ranging from 10 to 15 or 20 or more terminals in the offices, depending on the size of the office. So the touchscreen terminals are available to customers at all times for the voter registration process. As I stated again, just last Monday, we completed this rollout, and we have ambassadors of our employees that are in the offices. They're looking for customers if they to make sure they get to the touchscreen terminal area to complete the voter registration process. So the customers who are registering to vote are given a checklist. It's pink in color. We make sure that our employees are mindful and watchful to direct the customers to these touchscreen terminals. So again, we will monitor the process. We'll make adjustments as we need. And we have also shared that the electronic voter registration process and AB 1461 will continue to look at this process and make refinements as they come to our attention. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you very much. Seeing none, LAO or Department of Finance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We don't have any specific recommendations related to the $3.9 million, which, as the director indicated, is primarily going to cover costs related to implementation of AB 1461 for upgrading forms for people who are renewing by mail. However, when this item was heard in the Senate recently, we were asked by the Senate subcommittee to look into this issue in response to some concerns that have been raised. We are still in the process of hearing from stakeholders as well as working with the department to understand. In particular, I think one of the core issues is that AB 1461, as well as other legislation, requires that certain information is collected by DMV and transmitted to the Secretary of State. And the concern that has been raised is that some of the information, such as party preference or language preference, is collected in a separate step of the process, and that there's a concern that some of the information is not being collected. Because it is required of DMV to collect all of this information, and in response to the request of the Senate, we're continuing to look into this to understand better how DMV's process is working and whether or not there's anything else that they could be doing. So sort of maybe an additional issue on this topic, but maybe not specifically related to the $3.9 million request.
Thank you.
Nothing from finance.
All right. Thank you. I know there's a number of folks here who want to be heard on this, so please come forward. We'll be happy to hear from you. My understanding is that it's been worked out that there'll be a couple of longer presentations and then some additional folks. So if we could make some room at the table, that would be great. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you. Mr. Chair and members, I'm Trudy Schaefer, representing the League of Women Voters of California. And we have concerns that are shared by a number of other organizations, a few of whom can be here today. I've noted that you received recently a letter from another set of 5 organizations that include the California Association of Clerks and Election Officials. We basically would say that we endorse your staff recommendation, and we would ask that you require the DMV to provide a plan to achieve a more seamless, accessible electronic registration process for persons who are registering or re-registering at the DMV. A little context about how we got to where we are today. We have, for 20 years or so, have had a federal law, the Motor Voter Act, the National Voter Registration Act, that requires DMVs to provide individuals voter registration services simultaneously with their driver's license or ID card application, renewal, change of address, and that is to require them to be able to provide that information and be registered without providing duplicative information. And as a result of that, a year ago, February, several of our organizations sent a pre-litigation notice letter of noncompliance with the NVRA. And as you heard, as a result, in last year's May revise for the current year, the DMV and Secretary of State Alex Padilla requested and received about $2.3 million for the current year software and hardware upgrade. However, the process that the DMV is now implementing is far from the integrated approach that we thought was envisioned at that time, at least at the DMV field offices. And so our concerns, we think, are important because the process that's going on right now is providing the infrastructure for implementing AB 1461, the issue that you have at hand. We are very pleased that for at least the past 3 months, the DMV, the Secretary of State, the parties to our notice letter, and additional stakeholders have been engaged in meetings to inform best practices for modernizing that DMV voter registration system. And I will say we are very pleased that with the improvements that have been cited for the registration process that are rolling out right now. They'll have an impact on voter registration for the June primary. And in particular, it's significant that this is, I think, the first state agency that is taking advantage of the ability to pre-populate online voter registration. That process is very important to us. But nevertheless, the new system that is being implemented at the DMV field offices is problematic, and we do want to see more work done to achieve a better system. You've heard a little bit, and I'll say again, that the major difficulty is that when, someone who is registering to vote in person in DMV transactions has to do a two-step process. First, they indicate that they want to register to vote or to change their address or modify their registration, and if that basic question is answered yes, indeed, the person's voter information is transmitted to the Secretary of State and the person is registered. But voter registration involves additional optional questions, and these are very important questions about party preference, language preference for election materials, whether one wants to be a permanent vote by mail voter, and whether one can be a poll worker, which is very important to the county elections officials. They are not asked at the DMV unless the person goes to the separate room and logs into the touchscreen terminal. And the early indications are that about a third of the people who are going through this process, and we recognize it's early, but at this point, about a third of the people who choose to register to vote are not going to the touchscreens and completing their information. That's roughly consistent with the number of people, some 40%, 38% of people who go through the DL44 process at the DMV don't normally have to go to touchscreens. A large number of those would be people who are getting IDs. So for people who skip that touchscreen, the Secretary of State is going to send a follow-up letter. We've seen the beginning of it. It's a three-page letter in the 10 languages telling them that they can complete their optional information. But because of the way the process is working, they have to completely re-register, either find a voter registration card or go online and do that. That has a disadvantage, especially to language minority voters who will be getting this long letter in multiple languages, who may not know, may just not pay attention to a letter of that type. The Secretary of State has to send that letter because there's no way within the process for the Secretary of State to know in what language the DL44 form was filled out in the first place. So not only are they at a disadvantage in that they are probably going to be confused and given information in a difficult way, but also we have this basic idea that the information just may never be completed by people who don't take that extra step. If somebody is registered and changing their registration and they don't go to the touch screens, what happens to those optional questions is that they just are wiped out. So there may well be people whose party preference or language preference was indicated earlier in an earlier registration, but when they try to re-register to change something at the DMV and they don't complete it at the touchscreens, that information is lost. And we think that's a real disservice to the voters. I am accompanied by two other people who can comment a little bit more about the difficulties we see. Again, we are very pleased that we are having the opportunity now to have input to the system, but there is a lot more that could be done and we hope will be done. Thank you. Margaret.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Margaret Johnson with Disability Rights California, and our organization has been part of the stakeholder groups with the DMV and the Secretary of State, and we very much appreciate being included in that process and have found it really beneficial to work collaboratively. But we do still have some concerns for people with disabilities. For one thing, we're concerned that this particular approach is not streamlined, integrated, or accessible for people with disabilities. First of all, people are required to complete their registration, as been explained, at the touch terminals where driver's license tests are given. These particular terminals, as best we understand it, are not accessible to a full range of disabilities, such as people who are blind or have manual dexterity disabilities. And this, of course, is because these machines are used to take driver's license tests, and people who are blind don't usually take driver's license tests. So, of course, they wouldn't need to be accessible to those folks. But in order to complete the registration process, people who are blind now will need to go to these terminals and use them, which means that DMV staff will have to help these folks complete the registration. We're concerned because of that people who actually need assistance with these touch screens could skip that final step, and as has been explained by Trudy, would not indicate their language preference, political party, and some other things that were mentioned. If the person actually goes there and gets assistance, we're concerned that there might be some privacy concerns because the person will have to say out loud to the person what their political party affiliation is, for example, in a public place, and that wouldn't really afford, we don't believe, the privacy that people need. Further, people may skip that and not want to explain what their political party is, which could mean that they wouldn't be able to vote in the primary because they wouldn't have that information there. We also have concerns that materials are not in plain language for people with learning or intellectual disabilities, and we also have a concern that the DMV website used for renewals or driver's licenses and IDs and change of addresses is not accessible to people who are blind or have reading disabilities. We think that DMV should have used state resources to plan for the voter registration process. There are a number of resources throughout the state dealing with accessibility issues. For example, DMV went live with the new voter registration process in early April, as they've told you, but there is not a scheduled meeting with the Department of Rehabilitation, for example, to discuss access issues until this month. So some of the concerns that we have about the website or other access issues, they're not actually meeting with state agencies that could help. We also think new funding should really require transparency. DMV officials have been reluctant to share their protocols about disability access, how they assist people, and how they provide accommodations due to fraud concerns. At least that's my understanding. I could have that wrong. And we think that there really needs to be a distinction made between thieves that are trying to register a stolen car and stakeholder groups needing information to make sure voter registration is accessible. We heard here today that you all were invited to come and see the process and inspect it. We have not been. I have not been asked to come and see how the process works or check out the terminals. So we really think that in order to make this work, it'd be really important to continue to have people with disabilities and their the advocacy groups such as our own really be consulted prior to making any purchases that the DMV may be contemplating, such as signature pads or other things like that. So thank you, and we urge you to ensure that DMV initiates a streamlined, accessible process for voter registration.
Thank you.
I'll try to be brief. I echo the comments of my colleagues, but my name's Lori Schellenberger. I'm with the American Civil Liberties Union, representing League of Women Voters and other organizations in the threat of litigation under the NVRA. And I want to start by commending DMV and Cal staff for the work that they have done. And it's very exciting to see these changes unfolding, and we're very encouraged by it. And I think highlighting that DMV is the first state agency to incorporate online registration in a way that it's fully integrated into their system and is having, I think, pretty dramatic impact immediately is exciting. Also, I want to preface my comments with saying, in our stakeholder meetings, we have felt that there's a commitment from DMV to really ensure a positive consumer experience, and they bring a broad range of people to those meetings, and they're very responsive to concerns that we've shared. But I think what we want to highlight in this process, since this is about 1461 being implemented, we do not want to lose the opportunity to address what we see as a glaring problem with the system that has been put in place that is going to be used as the infrastructure for 1461 implementation, and that is the fact that 1/3 of voters, as of right now, are registering without using the touchscreen terminals. And regardless of how you frame it, whether it's a one-step or a two-step process, I think that's not really the issue. The issue is whether or not the voter registration experience is fully integrated in a way that no one can walk out of DMV without having completed the entire voter registration process. And how that looks is something that, we feel somewhat awkward in trying to dictate, because we understand that DMV structures are fragile and complicated, and every change, it's a domino effect. That said, it has felt like the system is trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. And so at some point, something may have to give, whether that's new hardware that allows the voter to interface directly with some kind of touchpad or touchscreen terminals as a part of their DMV transaction before they walk out the door, whether that's changing the form to integrate it, but that implicates the ease system. We understand that all of those things implicate other processes, but we would like to see this budget request, as LAO has requested, include a budget trailer amendment that really does state a commitment to working with stakeholders to find a process that ensures that we don't have 1/3 of people walking out without party preference, without language preference. And that moment, we've indicated a desire to discuss that. We've waited until 1461 implementation because those issues would be addressed in that process, we hope, and now is that time. And we just don't want to see it move forward without serious consideration for how we can address those voters that we believe are slipping through the cracks, particularly at a time when the state is looking at dramatically changing our election system to move toward vote by mail for more jurisdictions. That we don't want voters being registered to vote and not understanding they can get a ballot in language if, in fact, an election is going to be conducted by mail. We want them to have a real opportunity to cast a ballot, and without providing that information, we want them to be able to vote in their primary. And there's thousands of people now registering to vote without party preference. So we urge you to follow the committee staff's recommendations and LAO recommendations. And thanks for your time.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Hi, Chair, members of the committee. Nicholas Heidorn with California Common Cause. We want to applaud some of the positive changes that have already been made in DMV's process, and we join our colleagues with ACLU, League of Women Voters, and DRC in encouraging to move to a more seamless process to ensure we don't get incomplete registrations. Thank you.
Hello, Andrew Medino of Asian Americans Advancing Justice California, a project of Advancing Justice Asian Law Caucus and Advancing Justice Los Angeles. Supportive of the staff recommendations to make this into a seamless one-step process. It's unfortunate if we lose some of this data, especially with language preference. Asian Americans, 1/3 of the community in California are language limited proficient, so getting that information and data is very vital. Thank you for allowing me to make comments.
Thank you. Was there any additional comments?
Mr. Chair, sorry, might we respond very briefly to some of the points that have been made?
Yes, we've taken a long time with this item, and I do want to give you an opportunity to respond, but the
I appreciate it.
presentation was long, so keep it as short as possible.
There's been much discussion about a two-step process. I appreciated Lori's comments that it's less about one-step or two-step, but rather how do we ensure that we're able to collect information from customers that want to register to vote before walking out the door. And I believe that you have heard from Director Shiamoto about some additional improvements that were implemented just this week that will assist DMV in directing customers to the touchscreens in order to collect that information. I do want to clarify, it was suggested that for the individuals that may leave the DMV without filling out that information, that if they were already registered to vote, that their information would be overridden or overlaid in some fashion where their current party affiliation would be lost. It is my understanding, based on the conversations that we have had with the Secretary of State's office, that if, in fact, the customer has moved to a new address and they simply are looking to update their voter record in a way to reflect their new address, that it simply updates your new address but does not in any way overlay or override your party affiliation, your vote by mail preference, or language preference. So that's an important point that I want to ensure that members understand. As to the issues of accessibility, I want to point out that DMV has already met with the Department of Rehabilitation and has yet another meeting set up. I believe it's next week, if I'm not mistaken. There's a number of things that DMV does do to provide accessibility to all of the DMV's customers, but we want to continue to work with the Department of Rehabilitation and stakeholders to ensure that we're continuing to improve accessibility going forward. And that may also include improvements to the website. So again, members, I apologize, but just one other point that I wanted to make is that there has always been a voter registration question included on the driver's license application. That was true with the paper forms. It was always contemplated, even when we were looking at the technology upgrade that we were making with last year's budget funding. And what we would also look to do with 1461. And members, that is important to ensure that we are posing these additional voter registration questions to people who are in fact eligible to vote. This is important both from the integrity of the voting rules, but also to ensure that we are protecting non-citizens from inadvertently making an error that could have significant consequences for them going forward. And so, again, I just want to reiterate that we understand the importance of ensuring that we are collecting information such as party affiliation, language preference, et cetera. We'll continue to make improvements at the department towards that end, and as we work to implement AB 1461. But I just want to make sure that members were aware of those specific points.
Thank you. I get that the department is working in good faith to address many of the issues that have been heard both in this subcommittee and in our colleagues' subcommittee on the Senate side. And the recommendation here follows through and really, I think, requires that you continue to do that. So we expect that that'll go forward. The one thing that I did hear from our friends in the disabilities community is that if you're going to offer assembly members an opportunity, legislators an opportunity to come down and test out the equipment, please make sure that all of the stakeholders are also, all the appropriate stakeholders are afforded an equal opportunity so that you can get the feedback from the people who are in the field looking at this closely and can give you that information that'll be helpful to your resolving the issues that are out there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I believe DMV is already looking at some potential dates to accomplish
Yeah, we're already
that.
trying to schedule some visits.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that. Mr. Gordon?
Just a couple of quick questions. Since I'm not that familiar with your process, are you collecting at the DMV all of the same information that's on the current paper registration form? So there's no differential there. And then, and what's the process of getting this information to the Secretary of State? How do you get that done?
It's sent electronically from the Secretary of State to, or excuse me, from DMV to the Secretary of State. So now, with this improved process, where previously paper forms were sent to county elections officials and they would have to manually enter that information into their database, now they receive that information electronically.
Okay, thank you.
Real ID?
Do we have a motion?
Move the staff recommendation.
Can't second it. Okay. I can second it. I'll second the motion. We'll take a vote.
Bloom?
Aye?
Bigelow? Gordon? Patterson? Williams?
Okay, we'll hold that item open. Thank you very much. And thank you for all the presentations. Issue number 9 is the April finance letter to implement Real ID.
So the